Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Aqil Ingram, and I figured I should take a few moments to be a little more vulnerable with you all and tell you a story that hopefully you can see yourself within that story. I wanted to tell you the story of how I was accepted into the Islamic University of Medina. So going back some time when I'm a teenager, I embraced Islam at the age of 13, and it took me a few years to find the masjid and learn how to pray and get access to Muslims on any regular, reliable basis. But once I did, I came to a masjid that was a town over from where I was living. And once I met with some of the brothers who were there as a high school student, and them being older than me, and of course being more seasoned within the faith, they told me that there is this college, this university overseas in some country that I was just vaguely familiar with at the time, the particulars of that country. And because of my grades in school at the time and kind of how my demeanor and my constitution was, that if I could just apply to this school over there, they would accept me right away. And during this time, there were students of knowledge who were in America, who were giving da'wah. They're on the da'wah circuit, as we call it. They're out lecturing and such, and they're being imams and such. And this is during the time period where we used to listen to tapes. And they're telling me that these people that we looked up to, that they went to this particular university, and this is how they acquired their knowledge, and this is how they acquired this skill set to be able to do what they do and know of the faith and be certain of the faith. And if you want to know something about the faith, you know the proper resources to go to independently on your own, and learning the Arabic language, becoming more proficient in the Quran, and just all these things. They kept pointing back to this particular university. So fast forward a little bit more, and as I begin exiting from high school, just about exiting from high school, but not quite, I began to meet some students who were studying real time in this particular university, the Islamic University of Madinah, and elsewhere as well. And I became familiar and or friends with these students of knowledge. Some of them were in the Islamic University of Medina. Some of them were studying in Egypt with scholars there. Some of them were studying in Yemen. Some of them were in Jordan. And I, in my building a relationship with them, began learning about this thing that's called talab al-ilm, learning about this thing that's called seeking knowledge, and learning kind of what it takes. You hear these adventures that they have, these spectacular stories that they have, and you hear about the struggle and the hardships as well, but you see what they receive on the other side of it that makes all of the struggle worth it. And you just build this desire, and you begin learning from them. As I did, I would learn from them as much as I could, and things of this nature, but I really wanted to go. So what happens is that I tell my parents about this. And when I tell my parents about this, I'm at the age of 16 when I first tell my parents about this. And my parents, they don't believe me. I tell them that there's this university that the brothers told me about, and it's in another country. It's in a country called Saudi Arabia, and they're going to give me a full scholarship to go to school there. I just need to apply. That's what the brothers are telling me. So not only did my parents not believe me, my father actually said to me, "So, son, you mean to tell me that there is this university on the other side of the world that they're going to give you a scholarship to go to this school, so you're not paying to go to the school. They're going to give you a place to stay. They're going to give you food to eat. They're going to pay for your tickets to go over there and to come back in the summer and then return back to school again. and they're going to give you a stipend every month. They're going to put money in your pocket every month and pay you to go to school? I said, yes, Dad. That's what they told me. And he laughed me out. He laughed me out. My mother laughed me out. I left that where it was. So again, moving forward through my high school years, eventually what happens is, it was a common thing. I'll tell you this. It doesn't happen anymore in this way. But it used to be the case that professors from the Islamic University of Madinah, that they would come to America every year in the summer, and they would hold some form of a seminar where they would teach some of the courses that are taught in the Islamic University of Medina, heavily Arabic focused and such. But they would teach an exposure and kind of let you know what it was about, and they would hold interviews and interview you, bring your paperwork and things like that, and you apply. Well, it just so happens that a particular summer came, and this summer came at this point, I believe I had either graduated high school or was about to graduate high school. I graduated high school, yes. I graduated high school. In fact, it was the summer. It was the summer that I had graduated high school. Yes, it was. So this summer that I graduated high school, they didn't come over to do these interviews and hold this seminar. But some professors did come, two in particular, they were touring America and doing whatever they were doing. And some of the students, of course, from the Islamic University of Medina were also back in town. They're back in the States on summer break. One such student I knew and had a bit of a relationship with at the time, and he was in the area where I was from. So he was able to convince them to do an interview, to interview me. And then that became a select few brothers. But where we're going to hold these interviews at? So one of the brothers in the community, he convinced his mother to let us use the apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, to hold these interviews there. Okay? So somehow, I don't know how, the word gets out that the professors from the Islamic University of Medina are here, they're in this town, and they're holding interviews at this particular address. People came from all throughout New Jersey, they came from New York, they came from Philadelphia. I mean, we had to have had over 100, 150 people at this 2-bedroom apartment. It was so many people, everyone couldn't even fit inside of the apartment. So a couple of the bedrooms were kind of set aside, or things moved around so that we can hold interviews in these bedrooms, and people waited outside and waited their turn and this type of a thing. So eventually it was my turn, and I go in for the interview, and there was a brother who had known Arabic, and he was a student of knowledge. He had studied in Yemen for a particular amount of time, and he was pretty fluent in his language and such. So he was translating for me, because these professors, they don't really speak English, right? They speak Arabic. So he translated for me. We conducted the interview. They were asking me about how I embrace Islam and why I embrace Islam. They wanted to know about my story. They wanted to know about why is knowledge important to me? Why did I want to go to the Islamic University of Medina? They asked me some questions about the deen. They asked me some questions about the religion of Islam. They asked me how much Quran did I know at that particular time. So then I told them, and then from the range that I had knew at that time, they then selected a chapter of the Quran and asked me to recite it for them. So I did so. So we held this interview, and the paperwork that we had to have in place, I had that paperwork in place. And of course, we're talking real paperwork. Everything at this time is physical paper. So, passport photos and the application, and, I had to figure out how to fill out this application in Arabic and things like that. My Arabic language wasn't proficient at that time, and all of this. So we hold the interview. It's over. We go. And then I go about my life for the next year. I go to college. I start college here in the States for my first year. I wanted to major in English, but amazingly enough, that particular college that I was in did not have English as a major. So then I took up computer science as a major because of my background in my household growing up. And also I had been studying computer programming in high school for my last couple of years of high school. So it was familiar at the time. We were programming or writing programs in the language C++, for those that are familiar with, and give you an idea about the time period as well. But in any regard, I go to college for about a year or so, and I make the intention that I want to go seek knowledge. And either I am going to get accepted in the Islamic University of Medina, or I'm going to go to Egypt to go study with scholars there, and perhaps go to Azhar University in Egypt. And this is because during this time of my life, I had a relationship with students of knowledge who were studying in Egypt. And of course, they had a relationship with scholars who were there. And I was familiar about Egypt by way of them and the opportunities that existed to be a student of knowledge and seek knowledge by way of them. So I was certain, either I'm going here or I'm going there, but I'm going to seek knowledge. I want to be a talib ilm. I want to be a student of knowledge. And at that time, in those days, it would take a minimum of a year to get a response back on whether you were accepted or not. And you kind of don't know what's going to happen with your life, right? You don't know. Because if you get accepted in that school and in this university, the Islamic University of Medina, you got to drop everything and you got to go, right? Your life kind of is put on pause and you got to go. So you don't know what's going to happen. So just a couple of months before the summer hit, a few months before the summer hit, I had gotten married. And I'm, 18 at the time and things like this. And I got married. And just a couple of months, maybe 3 months into me being married, the month of June comes along, and some of the brothers that I knew that were also from my town that had gotten accepted, I didn't say this part, but this year, 3 people from my area had gotten accepted in that university. They went and they saw my name on the list, right? So there's a year time between when I was interviewed and when I hear this news, right? So basically from June to June, right? And, they call from overseas in the university where they are, and they tell me that my name is on the list, as we call it, the accepted list of American students that will be coming to the university that upcoming school year. And I'm like, wow, well, subhanAllah, so now I know, right? So I get a job, right? I get a job. Now I'm not going back to college for the second year in the school that I was in because I'm going to this college overseas now. And I start cleaning carpets. I'm trying to hustle up some money, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, how I'm going to get my wife over there with me. And it was a whole thing. It was a whole thing. And we learned a way to get our families in the country with us, even though they didn't have the proper visa to get in the country with us. I don't advise anybody to do this or try this now. This was a different time period. Don't do what we did. So we learned a way to do this. So what I ended up doing was I had sent my wife at that time over to Egypt temporarily, and then I went over to Medina, and my idea was in Ramadan, I'll go grab her from Egypt and then bring her over to Medina. It gives me a few months to get my apartment together and things of this nature. So that's that part of it, right? So that's what's going on in the back of my mind. I have a family now. How am I gonna do all of this? So I get this letter in the mail. I get this letter in the mail, and it does mention that I've been accepted in the university, but I should pick up my official letter of acceptance in, let me see, 1, 2, 3 states away, at least 3 states away, 3 states south of where I'm from. I'm from New Jersey, and the acceptance letter was in Northern Virginia in a town called Fairfax. At that time, there was this place that we called the Mahad, for those that remember this time. But what we called the Mahad, what it was in reality, we know this in hindsight now, that it was an official branch of Imam Muhammad ibn Saud University in the United States of America, right there in Northern Virginia. most people only knew about the Arabic program that was there. However, there was the Arabic program where you can learn the Arabic language. Then they had a bachelor's degree program in Sharia, in fiqh, in usul al-fiqh, in Islamic law, in judicial law and jurisprudence. They even had a master's degree in Sharia. They had a master's degree in Islamic law sitting right there in Northern Virginia. And then the events that occurred a few years after that occurred and everything was shut down for those that remember that time period. But that's not the point here. The point is that, okay, I get this letter in the mail and it's telling me I got to go down to Virginia. So I get together with a close friend of mine. We drive down, and what we do is we get there, right? And we get to this place. It's the Mahad, as we call it. And, you know, I show them the letter that I had, and they're saying that I'm supposed to be here to pick up this official acceptance letter and things of that nature. We're taken into an office and fumble around with some paper. Okay, well, here you go. It's in this this brown manila-styled envelope, you know, and the letter's in there. Now, the letter had further instruction in it. And the instruction that was in this letter was that I had to go to the embassy in D.C., the Saudi embassy in Washington, D.C. So the next day, we go over there. And most of what came out of that was, yes, these letters were giving me direction, but what I learned was that I actually didn't need to go down to Northern Virginia to pick up that quote-unquote official acceptance letter. I didn't have to do that, although it did help me to get inside of the building, but I didn't really need it. And when I went to the embassy, the most that came out of that was that I was able to schedule my tickets. I was able to schedule my tickets for departure, right? And my original departure date was like August 25th of that particular year. So they then were going to mail the tickets to me, to my place where I was living at in New Jersey. And at that time, it wasn't like it is now. Everything was paper. So it was a paper ticket, right? Paper ticket that had different layers of paper on it, because as you were going through the airport, you would take off a, whatever you call it, a level of the paper and hand it to this person, another level of the paper, hand it to that person, you know, as you are matriculating through the airport and the stops that you're making. So then what I also learned there at the embassy was that, well, you're accepted, but you're not done yet, right? There are things you have to do before you can qualify to go. The tickets and scheduling the tickets was a part of it. They said you got to get your medical work done. I'm like, okay, well, medical work, well, what are you talking about? What do you need? So they give me this documentation, and it's this list of all these different tests and things that I got to get done. And now it's already the summertime. I'm supposed to be leaving at the end of August. We're already in June, right? So basically, we're talking a couple of months to get all this stuff done. I mean, they tested me for everything. I mean, blood work. I mean, x-rays. I mean, urine samples. I mean, down to my stool. I had to give them a stool sample to test my stool. They tested me for everything, right? So you get tested for different diseases and, you know, all these things. You get tested for it. So we do all of this. We get this done. Then it's eventually it's time for me to go. Now, what happens is my parents, from when I told them this back when I was 16, as I told you all a short while ago, and now I've done my first year of college, I'm 18, my parents never believed me until my tickets came in the mail 2 weeks before my departure date. So they were completely caught off guard. They thought that I was kind of just, you know, if not making this up, that I was embellishing, or I was just very hopeful and gullible and just believing what these Muslim people are telling me and things of this nature. But now the tickets were in the mail. So now it's real. And I'm certain in what I'm doing because I've been working on this now for 2 years of my life to get to this point. So they know it's a real thing. So now it becomes a whole thing in my family and things like this. I'm going to the other side of the world, and what's over there, I'm going by myself. I had never traveled outside of the country really before, and definitely haven't gone that far by myself. I mean, you know, where I'm from growing up, I could barely go to the other side of the town by myself. And now I'm talking about going to the other side of the world, right? It's a whole new thing. So that goes and happens. And in the end, my parents, they drive me up to JFK. That's the airport up there in Queens, in the Queens area. And, you know, I have my book bag. I say goodbye to them. I go toward the gate. I don't look back. I get on that plane and I'm traveling to the other side of the world, Saudi Air. And it was a flight that went directly from JFK to Jeddah, and then from Jeddah it went to Medina. And if I recall correctly, it was something like 12 hours, 13-hour flight, somewhere in that range that it took. If I'm not mistaken, it was a 12-hour flight to get to Jeddah, if memory serves. So I eventually do get to Medina, and there was someone there waiting for me from the Islamic University of Madinah, waiting for me to get off of the plane, and that was very nice. Fortunately for me, I had some friends that I told you guys about that had been accepted the year before me. There were 3 of them, and they had an apartment together. So they wanted me to come live with them. So they came to pick me up from the airport, and I get on the plane with, I get in the car with them, and we start traveling through Medina. We're in this car. I mean, it looks different. I don't know what to expect. And at that time in Medina, in the area that I lived in Medina, it was called Hayy Nasr. And Hayy Nasr at that time, I don't know what it looks like today, but at that time, Hayy Nasr, that was the hood. It was a little rough, right? So, you know, the roads and things like that, you know, you might get these dirt-like, sandy type of roads with some type of brick or stones in them. And you do have some main roads and the main arteries of the neighborhood. And, you know, some of the buildings, they were brick but not fully complete. And, you know, it was an interesting vibe, right? So for me, my initial experience was when I got to Medina, we got to the apartment. It was nighttime by the time that we got there. So I believe it was after Isha by this point in time. It was definitely dark out. And I just remember this serenity that had come over me at that point in time. And I was just completely at ease. And I felt like I had gone back in time. The way that just the environment was, the way that the architecture was, looking at, you know, the cars and the people and things of that nature. But it's not saying that it was ancient or that it was backward, but that's just the feeling that I had, right? I felt like a man out of time. But even though I felt like that, I felt completely comfortable, and you feel like you're near to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You feel like you're near to the history of Islam. You're walking the same places where the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked, where the companions were, where the tabi'een were, the successors, great imams of our religion are in this place, righteous people and scholars, and all this was before I even got to the university itself. So that's my story on how I was accepted in the Islamic University of Madinah. I shared this story with you so that you can see yourself inside of the experience and hopefully have that experience for yourself. And if you're unable to have it, then perhaps you can have that experience through my story, and it can help you in your life and help others too that are interested in the quest of knowledge and what it's all about. We'll see you next time. If you guys like this type of a content, then perhaps we'll do more of this and telling our story and helping you all get to where you all need to be. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على محمد والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Wait, don't go anywhere yet. I appreciate you getting to the end of the video. I have a question for you. Do you have a desire in you to become a student of knowledge? Have you wanted to travel overseas or even get into an Islamic university, maybe even the Islamic University of Madinah, but things didn't pan out for you? Maybe you wanted to learn the Arabic language, you learned some or none at all, and you just don't have the access that you need to get into the path of knowledge. Well, I have a gift for you. We have put together a program for you where we give you the experience that we had in the Islamic University of Madinah, the actual courses in the Islamic University of Madinah, remove all the barriers, and just give you the experience. You don't have to know Arabic. You don't have to travel overseas. You don't have to get accepted in university. We are calling it the Medina Student Boot Camp. We give you that and so much more. If this sounds like you, click the link below. See you on the other side.